was sex trafficking. We talked, well, first of all, Neera Nundy spoke from Dasra on their very excellent research that they did a year ago. Fantastic research. Some key points that came out of that were the need to strengthen the capacity to respond to trafficking in general, strengthen the capacity to identify victims of trafficking in India, and do a better job responding to the demand for trafficking. The discussion centered, I also co-hosted this session. Emancipaction is working on a pilot project in Mumbai to develop a crisis assessment center. It will be a pilot beginning in Mumbai. It will work like an emergency room of aftercare to do holistic assessment, thorough assessment and aftercare of victims that will be short-term, high security, and then partnering with partners, government and civil society on both sides, the intake referral and the output at the other end. So ask me more questions about that later on if you'd like to. The discussion focused around holistic human rights approaches to victim care and to intervention. We talked about the 4 Ps: prevention, prosecution, protection, and partnership. Hallmark of our discussion was probably around collaboration and real partnership, ways that we can work together because this is such a large issue. We talked about schools and preventative efforts in schools to keep especially at-risk and very vulnerable children in school. About very difficult cases of trafficking and why this is such a difficult issue to address because the trauma is so very significant in victims. And then we made mention of the session that will happen tomorrow. We'll go a little bit deeper about physical and mental health trauma and treatment plans for victims. We mentioned that this is not just an issue about poverty, but also about exploitation. And the deep need for psychologists and mental health care collaborators working within all of our different types of programs. We may be doing job skills training or education or on the legal side of things. All of these things need to be informed by mental health care and trauma-based, trauma-focused aftercare. All right, action steps. We thought we would continue this conversation. We passed around contact information. If any of you would like to participate in that ongoing conversation, please see me at some point. I'll be around all day today and tomorrow. And we would be happy to continue discussing and figuring out how we can collaborate in a more effective way to not only care holistically for victims, but also end the scourge of trafficking and this form of violence against women and children. Thank you.
So good afternoon. Our breakout session was on scaling with governments. The context is if we want large-scale impact, we need large-scale intervention. And one way to do large-scale intervention is to work with governments and make sure that the government can intervene in large-scale and make large-scale impact. So the issue was how we did it, and the discussion was about Landesa's experience in working with state governments in India, how we worked with the governments from a small pilot and then gradually expand the program into a large-scale state program. So we discussed about what it takes to do a large-scale, scaling with governments. We discussed some of the key points that came out and that I shared in my initial talk, and those were the first and foremost is building trust between the civil society organization, that is Landesa, and the government. The second was the program design, simplicity in design. The third was about how to leverage government resources. And we know that government resources are enormous, and that can be leveraged to a great extent. the scaling also, it's important to understand that the primacy of the government in scaling is first and foremost if we want the government to scale a program, and then also advocacy through programs and communications, sharing best practices, monitoring, etc. The sharing happened I just tried to describe what and how we did things in pilot scale, what were the preparedness scale time, and how did we prepare for scaling, and later on, what did we do during the scaling. There's actually a complete write-up that we have, and it's available. We'll put it on our website, and we have also given it to Emancipation, to Carol, and she can share it with every one of you. I shared it during the meeting with the participants. The overall learning that came out that I shared was that the scaling has to be thought about at the time of pilot itself. So the thinking of scaling has to be part and parcel of the thinking about pilot. So what we say is from pilot to thinking about a joint pilot with government. The second is about how you position the organization vis-a-vis how you position the program. For us, the importance was that positioning the program was more important than positioning Landesa as an organization. The third was combining communications with program in tandem constantly. It's not about communicating after something has happened and later on documenting and communicating. It is about a concurrent communication with government and with all the stakeholders. I already mentioned from doubts to trust. The important thing that also I discussed about retaining the core competence, because in scaling, there are lots of pulls and pressures, push and pulls that keep on coming on the organization, and one has to be very sure, very careful that we retain the core competence and do not spread too thin, trying to do too many things and thereby spoiling the program. And most importantly, seize new opportunities. That always comes, and it's important to take opportunities to do what is best to be done in the context that is given. There were very, very animated discussion, and the discussion continued so that to a level where somebody has to intervene and say, no, we have lunchtime now, so we have to go to lunch. So the questions were very, very pertinent questions. For example, there was a question, how do you really build trust between the CSO and the government so that the government trusts you on an issue that is as sensitive as land? And we described about how we tried to do it, but there are various other experiences others were sharing. For example, someone from Childline Foundation was sharing how they were able to build trust with the governments. The another question was, how do you ensure quality when things are in scale? Often we find that government does things in huge numbers or huge scale, but the quality suffers. That's a very good question, and we try to answer how we try to ensure by retaining our focus on the basic quality parameters to see that we do not do everything, but we retain the core competence of us to ensure that certain critical qualities are maintained in the program. The another question was, how do you ensure professional conduct or professional delivery, and not about a scattered or a sample delivery that often happens in various government programs. And we also discussed that. There was an interesting case somebody pointed out. One is trying to do with Archaeological Survey of India in trying to protect a monument near Gurgaon. Something initially happened which was good. There was a buy-in from the top, but then it got stuck in the middle, and then she was seeking advice how they can go forward. So there was other discussions, and other participants tried to advise them how to go forward, and that was really good. We also had one person from Childline Foundation, I must thank her, and they also gave us their experience of how they started from a small pilot in Mumbai, and now they're in 91 cities all across, quite a large scale out as well. This is not to say that this is the only way to scale. There are many other ways programs can be scaled. The important point is that we need to recognize that certain programs which are more rights-based, which are more entitlement-based, government has a pivotal role or a primary role to scale those programs. The question is how we do that and how we ensure that we achieve our basic objectives and goals that we wanted to achieve. So, in fact, the discussions even continued during lunch, and I'm happy to share bilaterally if other people are interested. Thank you so much.
Hello. In the session, the Catalyst session, Working with Men, we briefly touched upon a few points. One of the key points that came up was women's empowerment and violence and discrimination against women is such a huge problem, and we recognize the men's role in this problem, then we also need to recognize them as a part of the solution. So there need to be intervention which engage men as a part of the solution and not just the problem. So that was one of the key points. Some learnings that I shared which had to do where, yes, men want to change, and we all need to believe in that fact. Some of the other things that we talked about was more on the practical side of it, where if others have to start working with men, what sort of support do we require? Some of the things that we have identified as an organization are developing tools and methodology, conducting research, building capacity of other organizations to start working with men. And one of the key points that we talked about was we don't need to start new initiatives to start working with men, but within the existing programs, existing networks, how can we start engaging men? Some of the questions were, again, as I said, on the practical side, is how do you actually work with men? How do you attract them? How do you attract them into a program? What are the modules that you talk about? What is the theory behind developing those modules? And there was a lot of discussion that went on those points. And as somebody pointed out in the thing, ECF has only one or a model of working with men. There are others in the country who are doing this and have a different model. So there is a need to collaborate. Collaborate in terms of resources, research, and there's a need for that, and that's what we all agreed upon. At the end of the session, we left with a question, which was, if everybody in this room has to start working with boys and men, what is the support that we require? And this is something that remained unanswered, so there's a lot of discussion that needs to happen around that. And in fact, that we thought was the starting point of the conversation rather than the end of the conversation. So what support do organizations require to start working with boys and men? So any inputs that others have, please do share. And we've shared the contact details as well. So looking for inputs from everybody on that. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Our topic of discussion was child marriage. India, as you know, is home to 40% of the world's child brides. In the next 15 years, more than 28 million young girls would become victims to this very practice if trends go on as they are going on right now. The reason Dasra was conducting this session was because we've just completed a research report, and this happens to be the launch of it, on child marriage. Just to tell you a little bit about, and that is what we did. We, in our discussion, did not ponder over the findings because we trust the report would do that for us. But we did talk about sector-level trends that came out of this entire process that took about 9 months. We are fortunate to have spoken to sector leaders both in the funder sphere as well as in the sphere of nonprofits, working right down at the grassroots level. And some of the interesting things we learned was concerns around longer periods of funding. You know, funding cycles need to be longer to be able to see and evaluate impact on issues such as child marriage or any issue that is in the gender segment. Fortunately for us, there was a vibrant discussion around it. Some of the funders in the room very much liked the idea, and we are hoping they'll be able to take this forward in their circles. Of course, there are challenges around it, and some of the discussion was around what are those challenges. Diversity within funders and the lack of homogeneity within nonprofits is one of the biggest reasons that there is a lack of collaboration in both these segments, and that clearly came through. Another trend that came across was that nonprofits do need to understand and appreciate the importance of evaluating their programs and the impact they're having, not to prove it to the donor that their money is being well spent, but just to be able to learn how they can improve and create better impact at lower costs or even with lower labor force involved. There was also a discussion around expanding the very discourse of impact evaluation within the development sector across topics, simply because nonprofits as well as research organizations believe that impact cannot just be recorded in the sense of numbers. And the question then arises that are all kinds of funders comfortable with stories of change, with anecdotal evidence, even if it is well documented? So what are those process indicators, and we talk a lot about them, but what are those process indicators that we want to put in place to see that we and our programs are on track to achieve our goals in 10 years from now? As you know, child marriage, there's conversation that child marriage may become one of the indicators for Millennium Development Goals 2015, and these 2015 plus, sorry. And this is a very important question for all of us to be thinking about. We invite you, as we did the people who attended our session, to join Dasra. We have a Facebook page where already our nonprofits are present. And we encourage you to join us in the discussion of how we can take this forward. Thank you very much.